Today's guest speaker for our Afterlife group is also our Dr Gemma. And Gem used to be on our UFO group committee as well, involved with that as the editor at one stage, and she's also on the Witching Hour, created the show, the Witching Hour, on every Saturday night on 4ZZZ at what time? 10 p.m?
10 till midnight.
Yeah, so she'll probably tell you a bit about her background anyway. And Gem has a degree in biological anthropology, which
Ph.D.
Ph.D.
Biological sciences for my degree.
I'll get it right, yeah. Anyway, I'm sure you said biological anthropology.
It is, that's my PhD.
Yes.
It's just all.
Which is really interesting when you bring that to the paranormal field. And while there are people in those fields who have degrees, there's not many. So Gem brings all that knowledge and insight with her because she's also a paranormal investigator too. So she has a wealth of information to share with you today. So without any further ado, please welcome Gemma.
I think this still's a bit high for me, so I might have to put. So yes, she's just given me an introduction. Thank you for all coming and listening. I came up with this idea because I've been fascinated by sleep. I've always hated going to bed. It's normal as a kid to go to bed and not want to sleep, etc. But since I was born, I've always remembered having nightmares. Now, every night, nightmare after nightmare, and it's always been a fear, and thought it would be something I grew out of, but no. I've still always had nightmares, usually 3 or 4 a night, and they're not pleasant, and have experienced all sorts of supernatural beings in sleep, but I also experience them outside of sleep. And first of all, I'd just like to know, before I start, how many people regularly have nightmares? Or some sort of experiences they can't explain, astral travel, those sorts of things.
As a child?
No, well, either as a child or regularly now as an adult, really. So probably, 50%, do you think? And of those people, how many have unusual experiences when they're awake as well? Okay, same people. Okay, so that's the connection. I think that people who constantly have nightmares have a different form of consciousness that they're accessing all the time. So we're going to talk about that, and that all the things that you have experienced in your sleep, you really are experiencing in your consciousness as well when you're awake and going to work and all the usual stuff. So I've called it a bridge to other realms because I'm interested in how sleep can be an access to the paranormal, or what we call the paranormal. So I said, is it altered forms of consciousness? But I think that most people actually have that experience when they're awake as well. So there are some people who don't dream, or they say they don't dream. Now, I'm a sleep scientist, or I was, I've stopped last year, but I know that most people do dream because I watch their brain patterns, and we're going to go through all that. And as she said, I have qualifications. I did biological sciences, so I specialised in genetics and biological evolution, and I then did a PhD at Durham University in biological anthropology. in biological anthropology, and I was actually doing about sexual selection in primates, so it was a bit different to the other stuff that I do, but I found that it was very helpful in looking at behavioural sciences, because I'm always interested in people and how they interact, and animals as well, because some people say that animals don't have the same form of consciousness as us, but I think that's rubbish. And of course, even now they're showing that plants also have consciousness and conscious awareness. It's not just chemicals. So I've had several jobs working as, I lectured at Durham University, and then I moved down to London, and I worked doing genetics research, medical research, looking at diabetes and the influence of sugars and mostly a restricted protein diet on evolution of genes and how you handle sugar. I then went into teaching when I came over here and taught science, high school science, and one of the things that I wanted to do in the think I taught for 3 years, was to stop children doing rote learning and learning about that sort of stuff. Of course, they had to get their exams and things, but I wanted to teach them to have an open mind. So I did lots of different lessons or groups of lessons which taught them about exploring other worlds. So they didn't do about sleep, but we did about UFOs and crop circles, and actually focused on Westall. One of the ones was focusing on Westall, which some of you'll know from having heard Derek the other week. 1966, one of the greatest Australian sightings, well, the biggest sighting. 200 plus people, although it varies between 50 and 200 about the eyewitness accounts. And so I wanted to teach people to have, children to have open minds and question everything. I've also done a diploma in parapsychology and hypnotherapy. I'm always interested in how the mind works. And so because of that, I have now got an outlet. So I'm always wanting to talk to people and find out about different people's experiences. And my outlet is the Witching Hour. So this is, you can listen on demand, because I know a lot of people like to go to bed before 10 o'clock, or they have a life and go out on a Saturday night. But you can listen on demand. So the last 6 shows you can access. I've got cards out there if you want to pick it up. It's got this on it, so you can take one of the cards. But you can access it and you can scroll through music, so I have to play music as part of the radio show, but you can scroll through and listen to the juicy stuff. Now, last night I had the interview with Derek that I did about Westall, and also talked a little bit about some of my paranormal experiences. So anyway, so that's my outlet. So if anybody's interested here who has any strange experiences and they want to have a little chat with me and wouldn't mind recording it sometime, I'm I'm really interested in hearing your stories. Whatever it is you do, if you do it as work or just research, or it's just strange things that happen to you, I'd love to hear about them. Okay, so I've got to put a few quotes in because I love English and literature. So this is Lord Byron talking about the dream. So sleep hath its own world and a wide realm of wild reality, and dreams in their development have breath, tears, tortures, and the touch of joy. So what I want to talk about today is the tortures. For me, sleep is always a torture. Some people have joy, and I have had joy in few dreams, and just because it's with the other realms, it doesn't mean it has to always be torturous. Sometimes it can be a pleasurable experience as well. It's the archetypal world inhabited by transpersonal beings, gods and demons. And Carl Jung said that sleep is an irrational fear of the dark. So anybody who has a fear of the dark, usually you grow out of it when you're a child, but some people actually have it now when they're adults and they don't like the dark. So that's always associated with sleep, and it's because when it gets dark, that's when the boogeyman comes out and the demons and the ghosts, and you feel a lot more vulnerable. And so that's so an atavistic resurgence just means that it's a time where it's a throwback from, you know, the ancient times when it was dark, you're much more vulnerable to be preyed upon. And so that's a resurgence that's happening now. More adults are afraid of the dark now than ever before, which seems crazy, really. I mean, I like to sleep sometimes with a candle burning, which people say you shouldn't, but just sometimes it just feels like it might keep the nightmares away, or the boogeyman, or the shadow beings, or whatever. So I'm going to talk a little bit about sleep. I worked as a sleep scientist, as I say, and I'll just talk a little bit about what I did. But it's actually, as you all know, it's vital that you sleep. And I learned that by doing night shift. I've never slept long, usually 4 or 5 hours a night, because I hate sleep. And so I would go to bed late, wake up early, be fine, have no issues. Working 11-hour shifts and then having children and having to do stuff in the day, maybe getting an hour or 2 sleep, then going back to work at night, was not good for me. And it only took a couple of years before it all went pear-shaped. So you really do need it, because your muscles recover with rest, so you work out and you rest, but your brain needs also this time to recover this sleep. So you're going through these 3 periods in your life of consciousness. So you've got wake, non-REM, so that's non-random eye movement, which we'll talk about, and random eye movement. And serotonin is produced in the stem area of the brain by the Rafe nuclei, and that's what causes you to go to sleep. So people who have problems sleeping, they take serotonin, or if you're traveling, whatever. Okay, so this is the closest thing I could find. So this is an experience that somebody's had when they're asleep. I'm going to share some experiences that other people have had and some that I've had as well, but I didn't want it to be all about me. So this is I got the person to have a look through for the picture that looked most like what they encountered in their sleep. It was a little bit different to this. This is from a 50s B movie? So, but it's something like that. That's not something you want to see when you go to bed at night, is it? Not really. So we'll have a little listen. Is that loud enough?
So this is the account of a very terrifying experience I had when I was 13 and sleeping in the basement of our house. So what happened was, in the middle of the night, out of nowhere, I woke up and it was very dark, but I turned over and I saw this huge black figure that looked like a giant spider almost, with these sort of feelers like reaching over the bed to try and touch me. And there was several other ones around, but they seemed sort of smaller and further back, not leering over the bed. And so I was terrified, and I jumped. I sat straight up and I threw my covers over whatever it was to try and get time so I ran. I jumped out of the bed, ran to turn the light on, and like spun around to see, and there was nothing there, and my covers were just lying on the floor, and that's what happened.
So do you think you were awake?
I was definitely awake during the events of what happened, definitely, because I mean, I threw the covers, they were on the floor, and I turned the light on, and then I sat afterwards for a couple of minutes going, what was that? I don't think I turned the light off again that night. And yeah, eventually I think I convinced myself that everything was okay and went back to sleep with the lights on.
So that was an experience from my daughter. Now, one thing that I'm really interested in is that I think that it's hereditary. I do think that people who have this different state of consciousness all the time and who have nightmares is actually hereditary. So it could be something to do with physiological reasons. Maybe we'll talk about why, some sort of chemical sensitivities, maybe a chemical sensitivity to different things like DMT, which we'll talk about. But I definitely think, and I've found that 2 of my 3 children have nightmares very, very regularly, like very regularly, and very similar to the kinds that I have, and they see things in the daytime and stuff. Of course, it could be just a behavioural thing that they've learned from me, because I am a bit crazy, I'm a bit of an out there mother, so they've been, you know, in that sort of environment rather than a normal environment where I'm always talking about witches and ghosts and aliens and demons and all that sort of stuff, although I have always been careful as when they were little kids to, you know, not scare them and things, and just, oh, it's okay, go back to sleep, you know. But that's the thing that I'm interested in. So those who say they regularly have nightmares, just have a think about if your parents have had the same, if they've even told you about it, or if there's a history of that throughout the family, or perhaps your children or grandchildren have had that experience. And I've got another one here. This one I find fascinating. Well, first talk about the other one. So she was asleep So she was probably in REM sleep, so rapid eye movement sleep, and this is the level that I think of consciousness, which is an altered state of consciousness where things most happen. This is the gateway in REM sleep. Now you do dream in other forms of sleep, and I'll talk about that, but I think this is the gateway. Now she says she woke up, so she was consciously aware of what she did, and she remembers throwing things, and they were there when she woke up. So that means that she actually did have that experience. Whether she actually physically saw it with her eyes, or it was an imagination, or whether it was because she was in that altered state of consciousness, she still had that experience because, as she says, the stuff was there, the light was on, you know, and she's usually a very rational person. They're always the ones that say, "Oh, Mummy, don't be silly." You know, that sort of attitude towards me where I'm like, whoa. So this is my other daughter. And this is the goblin at the end of the bed. Now there's a really interesting bit about this that I need to talk to you about. I'll play it first, and then I'll talk to you about why I think this is such a significant experience.
When I was 6, I used to go up to my parents' bed and sleep in between them sometimes, and some little visitor used to come and see me. It was a little goblin thing, and it used to come through the window once I'd woken up. I was just sitting up in bed, and it just floated through the window and sat on the end of my parents' bed, and he talked to me, and he used to take me around the house, and he was like a little friend, I guess. And then he left when I got back into bed and I went back to sleep. And yeah, it was a bit strange, and I didn't really think much of it for a while, but then I mentioned it to my mum one day, and she said she'd seen a similar thing, and we talked about what it looked like, and it was a little green thing, kind of like a goblin from a movie called The Spiderwick Chronicles. It was small and pale green skin, and it was pretty wrinkly as well, and he used to wear clothes like a little petticoat, and he had pointy ears, and yeah, he had some facial hair and a big smiley face. Yeah, he was a bit strange. I used to think it was pretty good. I used to like it. I used to think he was a friend. I didn't really used to be scared of it at all. I got a bit weird about it when a bit later, thinking about it now, it's a bit strange to think about, but when I used to have it, I used to like it and think he was a bit of a friend, and he always used to be nice to me. So when I found out my mum could also see it, I was a bit weirded out, because I knew it wasn't a dream anymore, and it was something that I was seeing, and I was actually talking to some strange being, I guess. So it was a bit of a strange experience.
Anybody else seen the goblins at the end of the bed? No. Oh. Okay, that's unusual. It has been documented in all myths and cultures throughout history, you know, and there are a lot of different cultures, like the Norwegians who believe definitely in it, and Icelanders, etc. And of course the Irish believe in the fairies, and they attribute them to different types of beings and creatures, but was a cross between these two. So that's the nasty looking one out of Spiderwick Chronicles, and this is the nicer looking one, and he looked very similar to those things. Now I'd been having this experience, this was when we lived in the Snowy Mountains, I'd been having this experience for years. I'd had it once at a different house, and then also this. So the weird thing is that they travel with you, like you find often with ghosts. They travel with you. You move house, so it's not necessarily attached to a house. You move house and they come with you. So then straight away that makes me think that it's to do with your consciousness. Are you projecting something, or are they attached to you, or do they have a special link with you, a gateway to you? Yes, Jack?
I wonder how big they were.
It was about that big. So they're not little tiny things, it was probably about that big. So pretty big, sitting on the end of the bed. And the fascinating thing was that I'd been having this experience. I'd told my husband about it, and he's seen and heard everything from me. So I've had every kind of paranormal experience, from being very small to now, it's very regular occurrence. And so he's just like, yeah, whatever. He'd never seen it, experienced it, but he's a very closed-minded person, very analytical, and so you wouldn't have expected him to have that shared experience. But my daughter, when she mentioned it, now she'd been having this experience for at least a year, and she'd come into my bed probably 2 or 3 times a week just to have this experience. Now, she didn't have it when she slept in our own bed. She only had it when she was in my bed. So it makes me think that it was attached more likely to me, not the bedroom itself, but to me, wherever I was. Now, she's never had it, we never had it in hotels or anything like that. So maybe it sort of knew my address. Maybe, you've got to think about this. It didn't happen when we've been in other places, but it did come with me, so maybe it finally found me again. So it's like a calling card, a bit like people who have abduction experiences. Wherever you go, you still have the experiences. And so I find this fascinating because she shared that experience with me. Now, when she told me about it, I was very, because she's only a little girl, I didn't want to scare her, but I was like, really? Describe it and everything. And then I said, I see that exact same thing. Now, the interesting thing is he had a wife with her. She saw the man and the wife. I never saw the wife, so I was thinking maybe the wife was somebody particular to her. Maybe the wife came along to maybe seem a bit less scary to her, or a feminine type being because she's a little girl maybe. But it was the man that always came around with her. And the interesting thing is it flew through the window. So the window, like with abduction experiences, they pass through matter. So they're obviously not of this reality. They're not of this world. Matter itself doesn't matter. So they just passed through. So it floated through, it would sit on the bed. Now with me, it was a sort of a telepathy. So they'd have a sort of telepathy with me. And it would be really mundane. It would be like sort of, how are you going? I've been watching what you're doing type of thing. Everything okay? Nothing at all really. But with her, it would show her around and give her experiences, and she used to love it. Now, I don't ever remember her not being in the bed with me. So I assume that it was her astral body that was being travelled around in the bed, downstairs, etc. when she was being shown around the house and having experiences with it. Because I would have noticed, because sleeping next to me, I'm a very light sleeper, and so I would have noticed that happening. But I just thought it was fascinating that she shared that experience with me, and she continued to have it after I was aware of it, because I thought, maybe now it'll not go see her again. But she actually liked it, and it stopped. I think she was probably 7, something like that. And that's the usual age that children go from believing in goblins and fairies and being open to everything and talking to beings and ghosts and stuff. That's when their mind closes down. And it's so disappointing to me. Mine obviously didn't do that, and some people's don't. But for her too, I didn't want my children's minds to close down. And you watch as the common consensus reality, people say, there's no such thing, you can't believe in it. Well, why not? My question is, just because people say, and scientists, me being a scientist, say that there's no such thing as fairies and beings, why isn't it? Because you can't prove it. Well, actually, why can't you prove it? There are ways that you can do it, and I think that this would be evidence that we had similar experiences and that other people have it. It's hereditary. I think that is some form of evidence. It's not sufficient, but we can't prove a lot of things at the moment, and there's nothing that scientists know compared to what's really out there. And that's what really frustrates me. Very few scientists will acknowledge that. They're told that they have to think in a certain way, and they say that they're open-minded, but of course they're not. And you have to be skeptical, which means that you have to have some sort of rational thinking, and you have to judge for yourself, but that doesn't mean that you're not open to all these sorts of experiences. Now, I know that there is a lot out there that everybody's experiencing to some degree, and it really frustrates me that people just listen to what the consensus is. And I'm going to talk about reality and the consensus reality, but this is very, very interesting. Okay, so this is what I used to do. So I'd get somebody, worked in a hospital, you do polysomnography, you'd put 36 wires, sometimes 39 wires on them, plug them all in, lie them in bed and say, night night, now have a nice sleep. You know? And it shows you them watching. We've got a camera on you, we're listening to everything you do, so if you fart in bed, we know. You know, if we see your bum exposed, we know, and we see it all, we've seen it all. You know, and obviously nobody can really sleep like that normally, but this is how we assess sleep. And obviously it's such a strange environment. Mostly it was for people who have issues with breathing issues, and they'd need to have CPAP, etc., continuous pressure. I'm sure some of you have got that and you've had to go through one of these types of experiences. But I wasn't interested in the medical side, although I'd worked in a hospital before in London and done a lot of diabetes and genetics evolutionary research. What I wanted to do is look at people's brainwaves. So I pretended I was interested in all that medical stuff so I could get in there and actually watch what people are doing when they sleep. Because that's such an unusual opportunity. How many other people get to do that? I mean, you can watch your partner, but you don't get to see what's really happening in there. So I thought this is the ideal opportunity for me to do this. It wants to keep snoring. Okay, so just briefly, sleep disorders. So you've got dysomnias, that's the disordered breathing. You've got insomnia. A lot of people who say they have insomnia don't. They just have really bad, poor sleep hygiene. So they'll be on screens all night, or they'll not give themselves the opportunity, or they'll have lights on, or they'll be stimulating their brain with caffeine and chemicals, or everything. They'll take Valium. You know, I had somebody who used to take 20 Valiums a night, 20 Valium. I took them away from them through the night. I took their bottle away in the morning. Through the night they got up and they took more. And they said that that's normal for them. And they wonder why they can't sleep. You know, and when you watch their brainwaves, not much happening at all. So that just shows you how bad chemicals have an effect on you. What I'm interested in is the parasomnias. Now, in the medical terms, you've got things like sleepwalking, which I used to do all the time, sleep talking, etc. And that's called Rem Behavior Disorder, because when you're in REM sleep, what happens is you are paralysed. Now, you're paralysed for a reason, so you don't act out your dreams, because obviously it's dangerous. You know, you can let yourself out of the house and do all sorts of things. Attack people. There's been cases of people who attack people in the night. You think they're frightened off, and they're actually, you know, attacking their wives or whatever in bed. So that's the interesting thing that we're looking at today. So the things that I'm more interested in. So you have things called myoclonic hypnic jerks, which I'll talk about. That's when you go when you're going to sleep. So I'm going to tell you about why all these things happen, because people don't know much about sleep. When people find out that I was a sleep scientist, everybody wanted to know what this was and this was and this was, because nobody really knows that much about it. So hypnagogic and hypnopompic hallucinations, sleep paralysis, exploding head syndrome, visitations.
Messy.
So this is... Sorry?
Messy.
Yeah. Ghosts, shadow beings, incubi. If you're lucky, you get the incubi. Demons, angels, and aliens. The night terrors in children. Rem Behavior Disorder, which is moving around. Dreams and lucid dreaming, and astral travel. So we're going to just cover briefly those sorts of things and how that relates to consciousness and your brainwaves. So I just briefly, I know it looks too scientific, but I'm just going to briefly show you these things for those people who are interested. So we'd be putting electrodes on the skull as well, because there is a difference in the different types of brain waves that are produced across the brain. So in the front you have the slow waves, and you can see a little bit of the difference in slow waves. I'll show you some better pictures that show it much better. Central areas, this is where you produce the theta waves, and the occipital, so back area, is more the alpha waves. So we put electrodes all over, and we have a look at a combination of all of it to see what's happening. We also look at the eye movement. So this is an electrooculogram. We're looking at how your eyes are moving, and so we're doing it by putting ones on either side, and you look at the voltage change, and you can tell where the eyes are moving and how rapidly they're moving. And so you get, this is awake, So when you're a sleep scientist, you can read the outputs of everything. You know whether people are faking it, whether they're asleep for real, what stage they're in, whether they're looking at even without the camera, whether they're looking and reading and looking at their Facebook page when they're supposed to be pretending to be asleep, etc., etc. You've got the slow eye rolling, so that's when you're just falling asleep. Your eyes just start to roll, and so it's a good thing if you sleep with anybody. Have a look, and you can tell what stage of sleep they're in just by their eye movement. It's a great thing to do. Probably freak them out if they wake up, because that's a really light sleep, so it's very easy for them to wake up. And this is REM, so this is where you have rapid eye movement, and you can see the eyes are moving a lot. Very similar to if they're awake, but the eyelids are closed. So this is possibly an indication of what state of consciousness you're in. Your brain is in an alert fashion, similar to being awake, and it's having experiences, but you're asleep. And we know you're asleep because of the different brainwave patterns. So that's just a little indicator as to making you think, well, what is happening? So this is just a brief little output that you see. It's a lot bigger actually, and so you're reading waves and waves of this all night and making diagnoses of breathing patterns and brain. These are 4 of the brainwave patterns up there, and this is the eye movement. So this is in REM. So this is what REM sleep looks like. The heartbeat is more rapid. So even if I just looked at the heartbeat and maybe the eyes, I'd know they were in REM sleep, and steady breathing. If you're normal, if you've got a normal breathing pattern. So this is the output. This is called polysomnography. This is what people do if you have a sleep thing. Now I know this looks quite complicated, but it's not. I just wanted to show you the differences in brainwave outputs. So when you're awake, you're producing what's called beta waves. Okay, so they're between 12 and 38 hertz, and that's what they look like up there. So that's when you're in a conscious awake state. When you close your eyes, what's really interesting, which I didn't know until I became a sleep scientist, is that you instantly, unless you're not an alpha producer, instantly produce alpha waves. So you've already changed your state of consciousness by having your eyelids closed. It's actually changed. So you're still alert and aware of everything that's happening, maybe not everybody in the audience, but you usually are aware of it. But it's you're producing alpha waves, and that's at the very back of the brain. So yeah, if you're feeling sometimes drowsy, and so this is the state that you also go into in stage 1 sleep, and then you start producing theta waves, which are these ones. These are the important ones. So they're associated with reduced consciousness, deep meditation, dreams, light sleep, and they're also produced, amongst others, with REM sleep. Stages 3 and 4, that's the sleep that you want, the consolidated sleep where your brain repairs itself, your body repairs itself. And if you're a light sleeper and you have sleep issues and you always wake up tired, it's because you're not getting any delta wave sleep. Okay, so this is where I can go in there, change a mask on a person, take a mask off the person and put it on, check that everything's on, all the wires are on, and they will not wake. And that's for everybody. So I can go in there and they will not wake. So sometimes when things happen and you go, oh, I didn't hear that, I'm normally a light sleeper. That's because you're in deep sleep, and it really is deep sleep, which evolutionarily, it must be important, because why would you put yourself at such a risk where you can't know what's happening around you. So that's when you truly are in a different state of consciousness and you're not aware of everything that's happening around you.
Well, how long does that happen for?
So that can happen in some people. So people who I've treated who were maybe in their 70s or 80s, who've never had proper sleep, they've had respiratory issues, and they would never get delta wave sleep, or they would very rarely get it. You'd put a mask on them and they'd go to sleep and they'd be in delta wave most of the night. They would be consolidating, catching up on all their sleep. And they'd wake up, and I had men wake up, well, and women, whistling and happy. They'd go to bed grumpy, talking about all the bad things in the world when you're putting the wires on. wake up and they're singing, happy, everything, because they finally got this sleep. Now we normally have probably about 3 phases of this a night yourself, but sometimes you might only have 1, and sometimes you might not have any. Okay, but this isn't the one that I'm interested in, because I don't think that's the gateway to those paranormal experiences, but this is. So this is when you have, so it varies, okay, so it's a low amplitude and mixed frequency. So you have lots of different frequencies. You're producing theta, alpha, and what's called sawtooth waves. And they're like really, really spiky waves, and as yet we don't quite understand what they are and what they mean. But I'm sure they have something to do with this state of consciousness of being aware. What I would love to do, which I didn't get the opportunity to do, is have somebody have a paranormal experience and look at what's happening with the brainwaves at that time. What I did do a few times with myself, when it was a quiet night, I'd get people to put wires all over me and I would meditate and see what it looks like. And see what it looks like, what's happening when you sleep. And you do produce, I was producing a lot of theta waves, mostly theta waves and some delta waves as well. In that, I mean, I practice meditation a lot, so if you practice it continually, you will be producing theta waves, which is again accessing that other realm, so you're more likely to have really unusual experiences in that. And of course you're paralyzed as well. So that's the main thing, is that you're paralyzed. So again, just quickly showing you the differences in the sleep. So you can see these massive, massive waves. These are the sawtooth waves here, little spikes. This is REM sleep, and if you again look, you compare, it's very similar to being awake. Very similar state. So your consciousness is similar to being awake, but it's not similar to the other states. So as you change your consciousness, as you change the amount of differences in your brainwaves, your consciousness changes. So from being conscious and alert, having only 5 physical centers, which I don't agree with, but that's what they say, consensus. Alpha waves, so then if you're feeling relaxed, you just close your eyes and you're just chilling, maybe daydreaming. That's usually alpha waves. The theta waves, the subconscious mind, so say REM sleep, deep meditation has to be deep. So when you're not really aware of what's happening outside of you, you can go into meditation and come out of it and it's an hour's gone and you, wow, that felt like 5 seconds. But you weren't asleep. Delta waves. Unconscious, or what they call a supraconscious mind. A lot of Buddhist monks can produce a lot of delta waves then. Buddhist monks who say they don't sleep, and there are yogis, etc., who say they never sleep. It's because they've trained their brains to, in meditation, still have that form of sleep. So they're getting the delta, the waves, the deep sleep that they need whilst sitting up. They've just trained their mind and their body, so they actually still are having sleep. And this is the time when you have healing, self-healing, immune systems, functions, all that sort of stuff. Thought I might need that for a few people. So beware, there are a few of those, just to keep you all awake, because I'm watching a lot. I haven't seen any REM movements yet, but I'll be watching in case. So this is the myclonic hypnic jerks. This is, and everybody does it. I don't think I've talked to anybody who's never had that experience. You jerk awake. 70%, but I think it's higher than that, of Australians supposed to experience it regularly. Usually at the beginning of the night, you're entering stage 1 sleep. So it's the alpha to theta wave transition. It's that transition, and it's usually accompanied by the sense of falling. Literally falling asleep. Mm-hmm. Okay, just quickly, the causes of it. So it says here, I should violently jerk your body to make sure you're still alive. That's one of the things that they think it is, that your brain suddenly thinks, oh, hang on, you're changing state of consciousness. That's one of the theories. Wake up, make sure that you're still alive. Your nerves can misfire. And they think another thing, because having been a biological anthropologist, we're actually arboreal animals and frugivores. Everything else that anyone says is not true, and it could be an arboreal evolutionary adaptation, so to living in the trees. So just to make sure that you're ready, and when you're falling asleep that you're in a comfortable position. If you jerk and you're going to fall off, it's just warning you that as you sleep you're ready to, you're in a place where if you fall asleep you're not going to fall out of the tree. So they think that could be, and I think that's highly possible. And then another one, which might be again from older times, is the brain wakes you to check that it's a safe environment. So you might actually fall asleep by accident, and you're in a very vulnerable place. You're floating along on a raft, and you're about to hit turbulent waters or whatever it might be, and it just makes you check, and then okay, I can go back to sleep. I'm safe. I'm in a safe place.
Could I interrupt for a
Yes.
moment? We often have this experience of falling during sleep that you've mentioned there, and some people think that it could be rapidly coming back from astral travelling, and that's
Yes.
why you get the feeling you're falling down.
Yep, and we're going to talk about that as well. So we'll go into that definitely, because a lot of people have had experiences with astral travel. I don't think it's the same thing.
No.
Exactly, no.
What about blood pressure? Usually goes down, right?
Blood pressure in what?
In this, when you have, I read that your blood pressure
It can do,
actually
but
drop.
usually no. Usually it stays pretty
Stays the
similar.
same.
Pretty similar. In deep sleep, it usually goes a little bit down a little bit. Especially if you've got very high blood pressure, it will come down a little bit. But it's not something. I mean, something that we obviously have to watch all the time through the night, because we're doing lots of different studies with people. Lots of ones where people are having palliative care, so they would have normally died in their sleep if they're not having treatment. So we have to watch them to a state where they might be ready to die and then intervene, just to prove that that's what's going to happen. And so you're watching blood pressure, heart rate, you're watching everything very, very carefully when you're doing those sorts of studies. So it doesn't change that much. Yep. So the myoclonic means it's the involuntary muscle jerk or seizure. Things like caffeine and tiredness and exercise late times will increase this. So if you go out for a jog at night, you're much more likely to have this when you go to sleep. So pay attention, or you have a cup of coffee when you go to sleep, you're more likely to do that. Okay, getting to the good stuff. Hypnagogic and hypnopompic hallucinations. So you'll hear people talking about this. So it's when gogic means to enter into sleep. So you can have hallucinations where you're going into sleep and you have an experience, or more commonly where Pompeii, where it's fading away, where you're coming out of sleep and you'll awake and you'll be in your bedroom or wherever, and you'll have some sort of paranormal type experience, or you'll feel like you're having it. Yeah, at least a third of people have that experience during their lifetime. So has many people had that here? Yes, many. Anybody who's not had any experiences when they've been asleep of any type? Everybody has. Good, good, good. I just think people don't like to talk about it sometimes. Okay, so they were first described in 1664. But obviously in many cultures people have known about hallucinations, especially in more shamanistic sort of cultures. The physician Isbrand van Diemerbroek was the first person who actually recorded it. 40% of adults experiencing sleep hallucinations. It's not so common in children, which is unusual. Which is good in a way, because obviously it's more scary to children, but that doesn't necessarily apply to mine, because mine have all had these sorts of experiences. And sometimes it's associated with the sleep paralysis. So often you awake and have an experience and you can't move, and we'll talk about why. Okay, so the different types. So you can have visual ones, you can see shapes, just shapes. This is when as you're waking or falling asleep, so with your eyes open usually, you'll see monsters, aliens, demons. You can hear things, you can have hissing and humming, whistling, voices, people talking to you. It's very common. And they can be really loud, exploding head syndrome, which we'll talk about. You can even have smells, so often people will wake, they'll be frozen and they'll say, oh, there was this horrible sulphurous smell, or a really scary smell, rotten flesh, those sorts of things. And then you can have tactile ones. You can feel things crawling over your skin. I've had many of these, rubbing, stroking. You can feel somebody climbing onto your bed. And some people would say, oh, it's just the ghost of my cat. Some will say it's a demon or a succubus coming to get me. The weight on the bed and that feeling, that presence in the room, even if you just wake up and you feel that there's a presence, you can't see anything, hear anything, but you know there's something there. That's a tactile hallucination, or so they say it's a hallucination. We're going to talk why it might not be.
Is that the most common, do you think?
Tactiles, yes, definitely. And auditory as well are very, very common. Okay, so this is a clip from Regan, the Exorcist reading, spurting the stuff. You don't have to necessarily be asleep to have these types of experiences. You can be really sick. So often people will be in a different state of consciousness because they're really unwell, especially in children. And this is another of my kids' experience.
When I was younger, I used to be sick sometimes, or just when I was laying in my room, I used to hear all these voices calling out my name, and it used to get loud and soft, and sometimes they were so loud like I couldn't even hear anything. It always made me really scared, and I didn't like it when that happened, and I never felt safe when it was happening, but I wasn't really sure what they ever were, but they only really came when I was sick and like lying in bed, all these different kind of voices, like men and women, and it was really crazy. It was like there was loads of people shouting around me. When I was about 8, it stopped.
So it doesn't have to be necessarily sleep. So I'm sure there's some state of consciousness that's included, that you have this sort of, you're sick, you're awake, you're lying in bed. I know I've had it when I've been really unwell, especially with flus and temperatures and things like that. Obviously, a high temperature will affect your brain waves and it'll make you open to more things. The question is, are these really happening or are they hallucinations? I don't think they're all hallucinations. Don't want to scare you. You'll not sleep tonight. Exploding head syndrome. Now this is a real thing and it sounds really dramatic. A lot of people have this, especially women. It's a really common thing, women over 50. So if you haven't had it yet and you're in that sort of range, beware, it might happen. It's not necessarily that sort of noise, but often a ringing, a screaming. You might go to the doctors and you only have it then and they'll say it's tinnitus. Well, it's not tinnitus, it's happening when you're in this different state of consciousness. If you're having it all the time, then it probably is. But you can hear screams, often that's common, sirens, door slams, shouting. It says there, twice as common in women. I'm pleased I got that right. And they don't know exactly why you have this, but it's often associated with broken sleep, which is obviously women have much more broken sleep, and it's true. We sleep a lot less than men, a lot less consolidated sleep. And it's obviously something evolutionary to make sure that we keep waking up and checking our kids, etc. Even if you get to 60, 70, whatever, you still have better quality sleep than men. So just know that, and you can use it as you wish. I've had a worse sleep than you. It's often treated with antidepressants, because some people have this a lot every night, and I've treated a few people with that. They say antidepressants help, but that's only because it's just changing your brainwave pattern, so you're not going to experience this. It's not good. So, who's had sleep paralysis here? So real sleep paralysis, not where you just can't be asked to get out of bed, but where you can't physically move. It's terrifying, isn't it? It really is. And it can happen either when you're going to sleep or when you're waking up, or just in between, that sort of thing. You'll be aware of it, and as I say, it's often associated with other experiences. And it's terrifying, because you don't feel like you have control, and you're very, very vulnerable. So only 7%, they say, of the adult population has this, so it's a lot less common than a lot of hallucinations. it's not very, some people have it a lot, but it's not usually very common. And you've got gamma-aminobutyric acid called GABA and glycine are released into the brain, and that's what freezes you. So that's the whole purpose of keeping you your voluntary signals to tell you to move when you're asleep, and because your brain's having these experiences in dream, and you've released this, it prevents you enacting dreams. So obviously, if you're not producing this, or there's still too much in your blood system when you wake up, it takes a while for it to wear off. So often it can be 1 or 2, 5 minutes. Sometimes people can lie there frozen and terrified, but it's often just a chemical thing, that. So it's just you just got to be aware to not be too scared. Yep. So it can be released too soon. So when you're going to sleep, it's released and you're still awake, and you're like, whoa, oh, no, you know what's happening, or too late in the sleep cycle. Then you have the really cool experiences. So you have the, and I love having these. I mean, even if it's terrifying, I just love it. I just think it's so fantastic, and I've had all of those experiences and many, many more. And as I say, people who have this heightened state of a conscious awareness this is all common for them. I've had things like fairies even, which is awesome. I woke up probably, I think it might have been nearly a year ago now, and I've had it several times, and there's a fairy just floating next to me, and I'm like, like a Tinkerbell type fairy, like the classic fairy, not some of the little goblins on the end of the bed, floating next to me. And I've been able to move and stuff and looked at it. And then usually you'll reach out, because I always try and touch them and see if they have substance, because I'm always wanting to find out what's happening. So that's why I love having these experiences. And I'll touch it, and it has substance. They all have substance. So am I fooling myself that there's something there or not? Everybody has a lot of people have had the visitations, the ghosts at the end of the bed. Maybe you've had relatives come and communicate with you through the afterlife experiences. The aliens obviously coming to the bed. That's the most common, is the getting abducted from bed. And I'll tell you about one of my experiences. Drones, that's a common one that I've had, where you have these, and this was long before we invented drones and we knew about drones, where you have these things flying across and they hover over you, or more commonly hover over your partner in bed, and they often have like little leg things, and they'll move, and it's like, and they can appear as metallic spiders or as drones, and I've seen them with little lights on them and all sorts, and it's like they're manipulating what's happening to you in sleep. And I've again, with metallic spiders and drones, I've hit them and it's gone, and they've flown across the room, and then they always fade. They always evaporate after that. Now, is that because I'm waking up and the change of consciousness is changing, or is it just the chemical reaction and balance is just fading away, and so I just imagined it? This is the question that you got to sort of ask yourself. Now, I talked to David Icke a few years ago when he was over, and he's coming back next year. He's famous conspiracist around the world. He's English. He used to be a sports commentator and then went all crazy, as the public domain like to say. But he became aware of all these things. He had that wake-up experience, which people seem to have much more commonly now, or they admit to. And he writes about all sorts. But I got to interview him, and that was really interesting, because he's the only person I found, maybe there's somebody here, who's had the metallic spiders, which I've had as well. And I'm fascinated by that, because when people have commonality and experience, and it's not widely known, lots of people say they have the grandmother by the side of the bed, they get abducted, they have demons or angels or all that sort of stuff. Fairies less common, but some people are away with the fairies. But to have somebody who's out there in the public domain, who I know has had that experience, and he only mentioned it very briefly once in an interview, and I was like, I've got to ask him about that. So we'll have a listen.
Now, there's one question that I must ask you. I've been wanting to ask you. The only person who seems to have shared a similar experience with me, and that's the metallic spiders at night. Now, is that true that you have experienced this? Because I'm still experiencing them.
Yes, I've had a few in Australia, actually. It's a strange what happened is, I don't know what it would be, about 5 years ago, in my flat on the Isle of Wight in England, I would have these massively vivid dreams, like so vivid, it was as vivid as the world that I'm sitting in now talking to you. And then every time I woke up, there would be these like metallic spiders on the wall or hovering above me, and the metallic spiders, I don't know any other way of describing them really. They were, they looked a bit like spiders, and they were vibrating very, very fiercely, and they were metallic in colour. And I had some strange things. I mean, one night I got so sick of it because of all this activity, electromagnetism, that's what it is. It's electromagnetic activity. It appears as a metallic spider, but it's actually an electromagnetic field. And I remember I got so sick of it one night, I'm going to go sleep in the front room on the sofa, right? So I went there, slept on the sofa, woke up an hour or so later, and in front of me was, like a cat's rhyme wheel going around like a firework, except it was metallic, and it was spinning so fast, and I watched it. It wasn't something that appeared and disappeared. I watched it for about a minute, and then I stood up and I walked towards it, and as I walked towards it, it diminished, it disappeared. But I've had strange things like that, and they're always in conjunction with very, very vivid dreams. Since I've been in Australia, I've had one or two experiences like that again, because I haven't for a while, maybe 2 or 3 years, I've not had anything. But since I've been here, it's started. But it is the source of it, I don't know, but it's some kind of electromagnetic field which is impacting upon the experience you have in the dream, because they're always very vivid when those things are about.
So, sorry, the quality wasn't great because he was on the phone, but he was saying that he had these experiences, and when he came over here, he actually had them again in Australia. And you find that when you travel around the world, especially if you're going between different time zones, etc., that you will have much more vivid dreams. Now, is it because you're obviously having issues with serotonin production and melatonin production as well, because your whole body cycle is out, and it's just allowing you to have more conscious dreams? That's the question. But I thought that was fantastic. As I say, I had the experience many times. I've had the metallic spiders. I haven't had it for a while. I've seen them over my partners, and I've actually physically hit them, and they have substance. They're a sort of a dark grey metallic substance, and it's like they're spinning a dream, or they're doing something and altering your consciousness. They may be programming you. Now, some people might say that that's an alien type thing, that it's an alien creature that's doing something with you, maybe giving you downloads, although I don't think I've had any. I keep wanting them to give me some downloads and make me clever, but it's never happened yet. But what is it that they're doing? They're definitely interacting with you. So what I think we'll do is we'll stop there and have a break. Yeah.
Yeah, I have black spider webs.
Oh, that's good.
And they sort of descend closer and closer to you.
And do you feel them on you?
Yes, I feel a cold. There's a stimulating coldness about them.
And are you paralysed at the time?
No, not at all.
So do you feel scared?
No, not at all.
And do you have any other sort of thoughts while you're having that experience?
I just feel, I interpret it as a spiritual experience for me, so I say, well, bring it on,
Yep.
I like it because I hope it's doing something for me. Yeah.
Excellent. Has anybody else seen the spiders or any of these sorts of things?
I've received a report about the metallic spiders. I can tell people later if I like it.
Okay. Well,
report out.
Yeah, tell me that.
It's kind of dealing with fear, These things, often we have these experiences to test ourselves with fear and not be afraid. So it's a scary thing.
I always embrace it, even if you're scared for just a second. And I'll tell you about my abduction experience and how excited I was. But totally what you wouldn't expect. But I love it because I'm an experience junkie. It's a new experience. You're going to gain something from it. Okay, they may chop you up and throw you in the back somewhere, or you may be taken away and never come back, or you don't know. But cool, you're going to get that experience anyway. So try and control that fear, which is a normal thing, and embrace it.
What about just normal spiders? I don't have metallic ones, but I have the ones with spiders. A lot.
Yep, and I'm an arachnophobe and I have it as well. They come down, normal ones, yes, they come down on a thread and they can swing and they'll come onto your face and you'll feel them, and so you'll have that tactile hallucination, as they'll say.
I often dream of them.
Yep.
It's terrifying.
Yep. And are you scared of spiders?
Yes.
Yeah, me too.
Why then do you have them?
Why
do we dream of them then?
Well, because again, we'll talk about it in sleep. You have processing sleep, so you're processing fears and experiences into your memory for memory consolidation, for learning. So obviously spiders are dangerous here. They're not in England. People always say, oh, you can't be scared of a spider. No, I can be. I'm rightfully should be scared of spiders here.
The spiders there are this big.
I know, but they don't hurt you. They don't do anything. But I was always still terrified there. But yes, you're programming, it's quite a normal fear. The fears of different things are usually not irrational. You can be killed by spiders and snakes and other things. So it's normal processing in the brain, just to make sure, just to remind you in case you forget, just be wary of those sorts of things. So that usually happens in non-REM sleep, the consolidation, but the hallucinations, as I say, is usually in the REM sleep. Fairies, of course, there's a varied range of types of fairies. Most of them are very naughty and not very nice at all, but there are the sort of Tinkerbell type ones as well, supposedly. But yeah, you depends on your upbringing and your paradigm that you create, and I'll talk about that in the next half. We're going to go on and talk a bit more about some of the experiences. Now, lots of people have told me about their experiences, which is fantastic. But what I'd really like to do is hear more about your experiences in detail. So I've got some cards out on the table, so they're there somewhere. If you can either email me, or you can give me a ring, or whatever you want. Yeah, on the side table. And let me know about it. If you're interested in me recording it and using it, you can either be silent, or you can anonymous, or you can tell me. But I love gathering these things, and I'm in the process of writing a book all about this. So what I'm planning on doing is sending some surveys around to people. And so with people's permission, if you would like to, I'm going to construct a survey all about this and use it as a basis for my book, because I think it's really important that people look at sleep as I say, this gateway to the supernatural, paranormal, or what I consider is actually supernormal. And people have these same experiences when they're awake, and there is a lot of commonality. Okay, so I'm going to just show you. This is a person having a hypnopompic hallucination. He swears, so just ignore that. So he's actually asleep.
He's still asleep.
Yep, he's asleep, so he's seeing things. So it says hypnopompic, so he's woken up. He's feeling things on him, seeing things. See, he's sort of coming round now, he's thinking about it. Questioning what he's seeing and experiencing. So this is very common. Lots of people who have had this type of experience, or you'll have witnessed your partner or whoever you sleep with experiencing it. Back to sleep. Oh, okay, well. But that's the process of waking. Yes?
It looked like there was a couple of lights.
Yeah, you could see. But remember, I was going to do a talk all about orbs and ghosts, and because I've researched the paranormal. Yeah, definitely. I've researched the paranormal for a long time, since I was probably 17 and lived in haunted houses. I've had so many different experiences that are cool, all about that sort of thing. And I've written a few things about orbs and stuff. I would have said that was probably dust. With digital cameras, often it looks like that. But some people say that it's always spirits, etc. But that's very common. I've done a lot of gone into a lot of haunted houses and haunted castles and things like that, and the older the place, the more dusty the place is. It's just full of orbs. It's not because it's a haunted place, because there's loads of dust, and each particle of dust is reflecting, and it's causing large pixelation. Now that's not to say that all orbs are not real, because I see orbs quite a lot. with my own eyes, and they are bright, full of light, so that there is a difference, but that's probably more likely than that, but not always. I'm not discounting it. Okay, so the incubi and succubi. Has anybody had the sexual experience, having sex with a demon or anything?
Who's going to put their hand up for that?
Okay, we know. And it wasn't this one.
So was it good?
Was it good for you?
I've actually had a few of them. One which happened a few years ago, which was absolutely terrifying, where it was what I saw as a devil, a real devil, and he actually had a forked penis, so it was 2 parts to it, and dragged me down into the floor. And actually, I felt myself going through the floor. That was a really terrifying experience. I woke up and I was on the floor. So I could have had, it would all have been imagination, and I had a disruption in my REM sleep, and I could have moved and got out of the bed and sat on the floor, or I could have been dragged. You got to think about it. It was interesting. So it's often combined with that heavy weight on the chest, something sitting on your chest. It doesn't have to always be a sexual experience, but these have been reported through since the 14th century. They were described as succubi. So the succubi are the male ones, female, succubi, and incubi, because incubi is the male version. And lots of religious traditions talk about this as being a demonic thing. So you were programmed that if you had this sort of sleep paralysis experience, you were evil, and you were inviting evil, and it was to try and stop you, having evil thoughts or whatever. Yes?
What if you don't see anything, but you feel it?
Yeah, that's the most common one, is that you don't see anything.
No.
Most commonly, you don't have. Remember that visual hallucinations are less common than the sensory ones, and so it's much more common. You have that heavy weight on the chest. You might feel breathing. I've got a friend who's had it many times, the breathing and the whispering in the ear, and not full on intercourse or whatever, but feeling like they're being stroked and molested. Well, as I say, it's a common thing that people have, and it's often related to the paralysis. And remember, your imagination is going wild as well. So I will talk about, but your paradigm, the paradigm that you've been brought up with. If you've been brought up in a religious experience, you would see it as often they program you to believe it's demonic because it's out of the ordinary, but it doesn't necessarily have to be. Feel like you're awake, you're conscious, and you're having the experience. So it's not, lots of people have sexual dreams, and they're very nice usually. I would like more, but this is when you actually wake up and you feel, and it's not very nice to feel like somebody's raping you, or and often it has that horrible, sinister feeling. Okay, another quote from Carl Jung. Active imagination requires a state of reverie halfway between sleep and waking. And that's definitely shown by the theta brainwaves. That's your imagination, your daydream. When you go into a daydream, it's the theta brainwaves that are kicking in. What I want to say is that it's very interesting that the paradigm, the ideas in the way of your upbringing, and whether you're religious or spiritual or total atheist or whatever, will have an effect on the type of experience that you have. So you could see your grandmother there stroking your head. Some would see it as a demon or a devil coming at you. Some might experience it as an angel coming visiting you, or an alien, there's a grey coming and visiting you. So a different person could have the same experience but perceive it totally different. And I think that's to do with your brain. Just like you all have individualized types of dreams, depending on your experiences and the thought patterns that you have, you can perceive the same thing. So this might be the same entity. There might only be one type of entity that's occurring, but different people are having it in different ways. And sometimes you might see it as your grandmother, or you might see it as an alien abducting you or whatever, but you could have a very similar type of experience. So this is something that I've had a lot of experiences with, the shadow beings. Has anybody else had shadow beings? Yes. Okay, so this is, it's scary at first, Often it's accompanied by sleep paralysis. You're frozen in bed, you can't move. Sometimes you don't see them and you just feel that sense that there's something evil in the room. It's really interesting, I find, that it's usually somebody with a trilby. Now that to me is amazing, because I was having that experience as a child and I'd never thought about it, you know, somebody standing there in a trilby. You know, is it the Men in Black? Is it CIA? What is it that's happening? And why is everybody having that? Obviously, as you grow older, you hear that everybody sees it in those sorts of forms, and so you expect to see it in that form. It's changed your paradigm slightly. Sometimes it's just a being. Often it's described with red eyes, although I've never seen the red eyes. But especially in I've lived in a few haunted houses where I've continually had experiences, and it's been a very common feature. It's always that, because I'm always asking them about it, and they're very hard to wake up as well. It takes, you know, usually a glass of water and a few minutes of soup, but they're running around. I mean, controlling them is difficult, and no memory of the event. So then, REM, as I say, this is the important time, usually about 20% of our sleep time, and yet most people say that they've had a dream through the night, but not some. Some people will say that they've never dreamt or had any dreams at all, but you maybe just haven't got a memory of it. Now, Freud was looking into REM dreams, and he said that there's several types. You've got the primary process thinking, which is all perception and emotion, and so you have this, you know, when you're having nightmares, you're having those experiences. You really are living those experiences. You're producing the adrenaline. You're having the fight and flight thing. That's why it's so exhausting having nightmares night after night after night. Your body is living through that. It's not just all imagination. You're having that experience whether you're still in bed or not. And then you've got dreams that often are in non-REM sleep, which are secondary process ones, which are often, you know, you'll go through your day, you'll have humdrum dreams about maybe doing some work, you know, something that you're trying to do, or maybe if you're a composer or something, you'll have the inspirational type dreams and you'll come up with a song or whatever. They're not usually associated with REM, although there's no proof for that. Lucid dreaming, how many people here have had lucid dreams? Fantastic, aren't they? Brilliant, it's so good. And I've trained myself to always, when I'm in nightmares, to make sure I'm aware that I'm having it. Sometimes I get annoyed with myself, I think, why did you go through that? You knew you were having a dream, you're just doing it to test yourself. So a lucid dream, for those who haven't had it, is where you're aware of what's happening, and you can change the story anytime you want. You can go and choose a fabulous partner, or you can have the best house, or it depends on what you want to do. You can meet the best, most interesting people and have fantastic discussions. You can direct it in any way you want. Your brain might have set up a pattern and you'll say, oh no, I don't want to do that, let's do it this way, let's change the dream. And if it's a nightmare, I often try and change the dream. So if I'm in some sort of really scary experience, I'll say, oh, rubbish, let's do it this way instead, and you can do that. So they say about 20% have that. So this is in REM sleep usually. Dement, who is the father of sleep studies, basically, it took him until 1986 to show that lucid dreams definitely occur in REM sleep. So again, this altered state of theta brainwave patterns. So we're talking about astral travel. Somebody mentioned astral travel. Who's had experiences of astral travel? Fantastic, well done. It's a really rare one for a lot of people. It's considered similar to an out-of-body experience. So people are a near-death experience. So you get that sensation of the astral body leaving the bed, you float above, you can journey anywhere you want. So again, you're always lucid in these types of dreams. You have a sensation. You often have, it's common to have the flying dream as well, where you feel like you're flying and things like that. Now, it's definitely linked to theta wave production, and I remember seeing a lot of people producing excessive theta waves and asking in the morning. I think I had one person who said they'd actually done some astral travel. Now, it wasn't on the screen because you're watching these people all night, you see them, and they didn't leave their body. I didn't see their body change or anything, but obviously their spirit, or whatever you want to call it, did leave. They felt the sensation of it leaving. Pineal gland always produces DMT during REM, and we're going to get onto the chemical productions of that and how it should have an effect. Now, what the scientists say is that it's the temporal lobe interprets sensory information, and it gives this sense of being inside your body. So you know you're here. You're not out there, you know you're here. And it's that temporal lobe that causes you to have this sensation of self and looking out on the world. However, this can go wrong, and it can be interpreted differently and cause these out-of-body experiences. And so you can feel like you're not in your body. You can see yourself looking down on it, and they say it's something to do with that. So, but of course they don't know anything. But that's what they're saying. So DMT, the spirit molecule. Now this is a fantastic thing. One of my theories, which is linked to other people, I'm not alone in this, is that people who are extra sensitive or produce excessive amounts of DMT, probably like myself, are much more likely to have these really strange experiences all the time. The fact that DMT is produced by a lot of animals, and well, most animals they think, and many plants, and it's produced by the pineal gland, and of course there's all these conspiracies that they put the fluoride in the water because it rots the pineal gland and actually stops it functioning. That's been proven. Why do they fluoridate water? Well, it's a poison, it's toxic, it doesn't have anything to do with your teeth. When you have the little white marks, I'm just going off a little bit, but if you've got the little white marks on your teeth or your fingers, that's fluoridosis, excessive amounts of being poisoned by drinking fluoride in your water. It has nothing to do with teeth at all. What are they doing it for? Are they trying to keep us in this sense of reality, this consensus reality? My answer is yes, I'm sure that's what they're doing. They give us a common water, and I mean, Colin Phillips is an advocate, and he's been doing it for 40 years of non-fluoridation of water. And when you live in a place that doesn't have fluoridated water, you have much more experiences, and I've found that I've lived in areas which weren't fluoridated, and there is a difference. So try and avoid drinking it. You can use an osmosis filter, whatever, to try and stop drinking it. But yeah, if you notice white marks, it's because you drink a lot of water, or you have a lot of cups of tea or coffee or whatever. It's a poison. It really is a poison. It's got nothing to do with your teeth, but they use that as an excuse.
Should there be iodine in there instead?
Well, yes, yeah, especially in Australia, because we're all iodine deficient.
So
having come from England, I'm used to iodine in the soil, but it's none here, so you need to have iodized salt to make sure that it's...
electrical qualities.
But I mean, I'm going off on a tangent, but it reduces your production of DMT, so it's basically keeping you in this world, locked into this consensus. It is N-N-dimethyltryptamine, okay? And it has a short duration of action. It only works for about 30 minutes. Intense effect, rapid onset, so within a few seconds, if that. And some people have no tolerance to DMT at all, and it can make them absolutely crazy. And Strassman, I don't think it says on there, no, Strassman has produced several books, which I've got, which are brilliant. He studied the experiments with DMT, because you can smoke it or you can have it intravenously, and he had controlled experiments with people giving them it, and they were having these massive experiences. It's considered to be the inner path to outer space. It alters your consciousness, so this is scientifically proven, alters your consciousness, and it acts as an entheogen, so it can give you this feeling of divinity, and it also is produced when you have stress as well as REM. So that's when you're more likely to have these sort of experiences. If you're intensely stressful, and this is something to talk about with poltergeist activity, very common. When I'm really stressed, things go crazy. And is it because I can have effect on I'm producing much more DMT and I'm having an effect on the environment around me? And that's one of the common ideas of what poltergeist activity is. That's why it usually happens. It's most common around sort of teenage girls who are going through all those changes. They're massively hormonal. They've got boyfriends and exams, and it's just like, wah! And that's when lots of things, books come flying off the shelves, they go crazy, all that sort of thing happens. So it's often associated with that. So I reckon it's DMT production.
So our pineal gland produces it?
Yes.
and you can take it externally too. So
Yes. So you can. Yes, you can. It's illegal, but you can obtain it, and you can. You've got to take tiny amounts, but you can have a trip. It's similar to LSD, those sorts of things. But this is the pure
What's
form.
the stuff that they take? The Indians take it how?
Tiny amounts. I don't know off my hand, but it's like minuscule amounts, because it will kill you if you have too much. You just and that's the thing. He did all these controlled experiments where he started by giving people larger doses, and they were going. Having these massive experiences, and this is when they're conscious, but their consciousness is changing. So he's asking them all the time, "What's happening? What's happening? What are you seeing?" And they're saying, "Oh, I'm seeing elves. I'm seeing this. I'm seeing that. It's all bright lights. I feel this feeling," and it's very commonly associated with the out-of-body experience, the near-death experience. And so the idea is that you have these near-death experiences because you're producing excessive amounts of DMT, and so you have this feeling of divinity, and you're seeing all these beings, and it's all beautiful and light and love and heaven, if you want to describe it as that. Is it all just attributed to a chemical process in your brain, or is the DMT actually a gateway to you being able to experience what's always there? That's what I think is most likely. So McKenna, Terence McKenna, you've probably all heard of him. He's a great philosopher and mushroom advocate for taking lots of magic mushrooms, etc. He described them as the machine elves to smoking DMT from 1965. Lots of times you see entities or beings, humanoid animal form, the little beings. Very, very common. So similar to the experiences that some people have when they're having REM sleep. Saying the little thing at the bed is because you're producing lots of DMT. And so they've got clever words for it, theoneurology, where they say it's bridging biology and spirituality. And so you're using DMT and the divine communicating through the brain via DMT. And the neurotheology causing the impression of the divine. Some people think that they're God, and of course we all are gods. God is within us. I don't know what your perceptions of gods as being whatever, but God is always within you, and it's all your ideas about how you want to perceive that or use it. But the fact is that it's produced during REM sleep and no other type of sleep. And I think that your sensitivity to DMT or the amount that you produce causes this opens this gateway, absolutely. And I think combined with the theta waves, that's it. That's like the radio being tuned perfectly to have these experiences.
So you're talking about the brain a lot. You're focusing on the brain.
Well, I'm going to get to why we're saying the brain, but not necessarily the brain. Okay, so. Now you've probably all heard about this. I'm just going to very briefly go through it. This happened last year. Very, very briefly. Okay, so what happened was working nights, injured myself, got a DVT, deep vein thrombosis in my leg, so I injured my ankle with the clot in your leg, and they said that's fine, just keep going. But because I was having no sleep and working nights, your body's much more susceptible to developing these things chemically, and no chance of repair. Anyway, I ended up having pulmonary embolisms across my chest. Basically, can't do anything about it. I was already on the blood thinner stuff, and so they basically said, well, you can stay in hospital or you can go home. There's nothing we can do. You'll probably be all right, but you might not be. You can die any time. If another bit breaks off and it clogs your aorta or whatever, brain, whatever. So you're in this limbo. And I went home. I knew I wasn't going to die. There's no chance that's going to happen. I'm never going to die. Well, we all know we never die as such. Physically we might, but anyway, I had this experience the next day. So I was on 24-hour watch because if anything did happen, we had to call an ambulance, and then they could try and do something. But it was this sort of limbo. I went to bed and was sitting up, had all these loads of tiny little ones scattered across my chest, really struggling to breathe, and felt like I was dying. I knew I was dying. I had that feeling, that knowledge that I was dying. I thought, it's not going to happen. So I'm just sitting there, and I think, well, I can do anything. I meditate, I do magical stuff, I can do anything, I can see things, why can't I just deal with this as well? I was watching some documentary to try and, on spies, to try and take my mind off it. Must have fallen asleep sitting up, but knew that it was at crisis point. Before I fell asleep, I said, right, this is it. I've had alien abductions, seen ghosts, I've had demons, devils, angels, I've had everything. Whoever you are, whatever you are, I'm here now, come and do something. This is it. And I said it out loud, do something. I consciously asked for help. I said, if you're God or whatever you want to be, you can paint it whatever you want, come and help me now. And went to sleep. I was a bit naughty, but went to sleep. Had this experience. And I was only asleep for about 10 minutes, or what we consider sleep. So I must have gone straight into REM, possibly, or something else. I ended up in a big black foyer, and there was what I would describe, again, my paradigm, a tall white, beautiful, tall, like at least 8 foot tall lady, long blonde hair, sort of opalescent skin, the almond eyes, in a big long white robes. People would say an angel, whatever you wanted, a god, whatever you wanted to call them. I ran up to her and said, oh my goodness, you're a tall white, let me interview you for my radio show. This is the experience, okay? And she just turned around and sort of like in telepathy, no, not this time, type of thing. And I'm like, what? I end up sitting in like a floating chair type, but I'm not in a chair, but I'm in a floating position. There's these 2 massive doors. The doors open, I get flung down this corridor in this massive auditorium. There's the big white screen at the end, massive auditorium full of all sorts of beings. But I knew they all knew me from something. And we're not just talking about humans, but everything. And they were all looking at me, and I get flown straight down and floated to the left, and I'm at the front, and there's like a being sort of standing there, and there's the screen, and then there's like all these things happening on the screen, and I recognise straight away they're all stuff that's me with some aliens, my mates, but there was all things to do with my life, and I was having the life review, and it was flicking so fast, and I was sensing all the emotions that I've caused to people and that have had on me. It was all going through, and I just went, no life review, no death, you don't even think about it. And I literally did that, not looking, not participating, and I could feel them all going, come on, this is it, this is the end. No, not. And it felt like it was a couple of minutes. I got zoomed backwards again, back up the corridors, doors slammed, back in the foyer. I'm standing there, and I go, the tall white standing there, I go, interview now, please. That's gone. Interview, please. And she goes, no, you're not. And this was all telepathy. You're not here for that. We're here to heal you. And I'm like, oh, okay. And so she stands there, and she puts. I feel all these beings around me, and I'm looking at her. And I'm in a sort of standing, sort of semi-sitting position, and I feel her put this little headset on me. It's like a metal headset with a little ball on the end, just like a microphone, and she puts it in my mouth, and straight away it tastes like sort of an aniseed, like a poison, something bad, and I take it straight out and go, nope, not doing this either, whatever it is, it's bad. And like telepathy, this will heal you, we're here to heal you. So I go, okay, feel all this love and all that stuff. She puts it back in my mouth, holds that. I feel all these hands of like healing hands on me, and that's it. I wake up and I feel brilliant. I feel totally cured. And remember, I had all these hundreds of clots all over my chest, and I was struggling to breathe. Totally fine. Looked at the clock again. 10 minutes. I'm a scientist. Look at the clock. 10 minutes had passed, and I'm thinking, what? Wake him up, tell him about this experience. He's like, oh wow, that's amazing. I'm like, oh. Fortunately, that morning, I had a scan to have a look at the DVT in my leg and check me out. And this is what I like. I've got real evidence of a healing. I haven't got evidence that it was an alien or anything like that. Evidence as a healing. So I've got 2 different ones about what I had, the thrombus, etc., etc. And then that morning, my daughter came with me. I told her about the experience. It was a few hours later because I woke up. It was about 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning. I had an appointment about 9. They did a scan. She did the scan. There's nothing there. And she's like, it must be the other leg. And I said, no, it's that leg. And she checked the report. She said, well, that's not possible. Have you got an open mind? I say to her. She's like, what? And I mentioned I think I was healed through the night. I didn't go through the whole experience. And I said, well, look, I had all these clots, maybe it all dislodged at the same time and it's all in my chest. Maybe that's why you can't see. Oh, no. Even if it had happened, it takes at least 6 months to disappear. There would be evidence of it. There's nothing there. So I have the physical evidence of miraculous healing, or self-healing, as I like to believe it, which I think is really exciting. The doctor got the report. He called me up in the afternoon. I missed his call, but he left a really excited phone message saying, oh my goodness, what happened? How come? How's this? Wow, that's incredible. Because, last thing he'd heard, I could have died. I was in this limbo of dying. And then so I saw him the next day and he said, it's incredible, how could it happen? And I said, have you got an open mind? And I told him all about it, and he thought, wow, that is amazing. That's brilliant. So if I've got anything to say about this, I do learn sometimes. This is my 3rd near-death experience, by the way, so I'm not very quick at learning. I've had 3. I would say if you are in a situation, no matter what your paradigm is, ask for help. Or convince yourself that you can do it yourself, because I still think maybe I just self-healed. I went into that state, used the DMT state or whatever, and I self-healed, and I used the idea of aliens healing me because it's more comforting or whatever, I don't know. But I find that really interesting. So let's think about reality. Okay, so we're nearly there, don't worry, we're nearly there. So I've given you some examples of sleep experiences, etc. So these are little quotes from people who I respect. Rupert Sheldrake is one of the few scientists who actually questions everything and thinks that the ideas and the paradigms that scientists have aren't true. We're talking about, he says that contemporary science is based on the philosophy of materialism, which claims that all reality is material or physical. We all know that it's not. It definitely isn't. It doesn't have to be tangible to be real. I mean, gravity, nobody knows what magnetism and gravity really are yet. We know that we say that it's about attraction of forces due to mass, but really, how does it work? What we call reality is in fact nothing more than a culturally sanctioned and linguistically reinforced hallucination. The consensus reality that we've been programmed to believe since we were born. That all this, and religion has a lot to answer for because they keep us in that state of fear, and governments, etc., come out with but they keep us in a state of fear so that we don't think and we don't experience what's really out there. Sigmund Freud, perception is less of a recording system and more of a protection system against external stimuli. So a lot of people will say, oh, I don't have any experiences. They're scared. They don't want to have those experiences. If you tell yourself you're never going to see a ghost, you won't. See, the gods are agreeing. You won't. I mean, a lot of people say, oh, I don't believe in that. Well, they don't usually have those experiences. Why? Because they've told themselves that there could be somebody dancing a pirouette in front of them, a fairy or a goblin, and going, ha ha, look at me, poking them, and they will not see them. And that's known because they've been told that they're not going to see that. The perception. Subjective and objective experiences. As a scientist, you need to think about the types of experiences that they have and what can be considered credible. Individual parasomnias, remember, disorders of sleep, and paranormal experiences are subjective because it's the individual having that experience, okay? So it's your perceptions, it's you that's having it. You have commonalities, and you've got to think about those commonalities through all different cultures. You've got all these myths and things about all this idea. Where's it all come from? Is it because we're all being just told those stories and it's just being perpetuated, or is it real? It goes across geographical boundaries, languages, time, everything. More objective experiences, which of course every scientist wants. Physical marks, like I had the mark on my back, or having 3 reports, bad, healed. you know, that's fantastic. Implants after alien abduction, that you can prove that they're an implant, that they're transmitting, etc. Miraculous healings, verifiable premonition and dreams, you know, shared paranormal experiences. So I've done a lot of dream telepathy experiments with people, especially with Steve here. We didn't really know each other, and I was asking for people to volunteer. This is what happens. He's my partner now, but you know, I was asking in part of my radio show for people to do dream telepathy experiments with me. I wanted to have objective tests with people, and I'm very willing if anybody wants to do them now, you know, just pick up my card and contact me. But to see, because I know you can influence people's dreams from no matter what distance. We were over 50 kilometers away.
Wildly successful.
Wildly successful. Didn't know him from Adam. He was somebody who listened to my show and who'd contacted me a few times. Didn't know anything about him, and I didn't want it to know anything. You know, it was better to be separate. And I've done this with other people as well, other listeners and people. And we decide, what you do is you think of something that you're going to send, simple thing. You can do it while you're going to sleep, so you can think about sending a shape or a little experience. One of the ones that comes to mind is that I thought, oh well, I don't know this bloke, but I'm going to give him a good experience. So I dreamt about 50 naked mermaids going through the water. So I thought, I'll give him a good time, you know, going through the water, because you know, I think he's more likely to remember it as well. Going through the water and going into a cave, and he gets to meet them, and he can do what he wants with them. But that's the idea. And so I sent it to him, and then if you wake up in the night, you think about it, concentrate about it again. On the receiving end, you record what it is that you've had straight away, because you don't want to lose it. You write it down. You have to write it down because you have to be objective. So you don't want to change it. You don't want to talk to anybody about it. You write down exactly what your experiences was, the time, everything, date, obviously. And every morning we would send an email to each other and just say, what was your experience? You know, first I would send my experience, not tell him what I'd sent him, and he would send me mine, and then I would compare it with what I'd sent. And he'd actually had, I mean, this happened a lot, but what he'd actually imagined.
I was over a maelstrom where I was seeing 24 pink dolphins or whales. I could tell by the horizontal tails. So the gist of it was there were 24 of these animals. She just said 50, but at the time she was sending me 24 mermaids, and what I saw was 24 of these pink mammals with the horizontal tails. The other dreams included, I was trying to send her a picture of a lute or something, but in the back was this 3-meter skeletal hand. And unfortunately, she got the.
That was an album cover. So
she got the.
I sent him nice naked dreams. Okay, this is a perfect example. I don't know why I'm with it. Nice naked ones. No, he sent me.
I didn't mean to send. I was focusing on something in the foreground, but she got that very night. She got the 3-meter skeletal hand, which scared her to death.
So there's this cover, an album cover, Grateful Dead, and he was focusing on this loop thing. Boring. I mean, why would I remember a dream like that? Come on. And in the background, he didn't even notice, is this picture of this skeleton hand coming over a wall, and in black, and this skeleton hand. And I had this horrific dream. I was in the middle of a black just void, and there was a wall, and I was cowered against this wall, and this massive skeletal hand came right over it. Now,
it was spot on.
You know, it was exactly, and that was what he was sending me that night. And he's like, oh, hang on. And he looks at the thing and he goes, oh. So he'd sent me the whole picture, and I'd picked up being me, a nightmare. Of course, I wouldn't pick up anything boring. I picked up the nightmare, and we had that so many times, and I've done it with other people as well. So Stanley Krippner did dream telepathy experiments. There's lots of books out there. You want to read them. Very interesting, fascinating. So he did a lot of work, but you can do it yourself. You don't have to know the person. You can be geographically separate. We were about 50 kilometers away from each other. I didn't know him from anybody. You just focus on who it is, then just their name, whatever it is, and sending them it. But you've got to make sure that you're objective about it.
And you have to agree to let all the walls down.
Yep, you have to let them in. So you have to not be too scared. And there was one that he did, another one horrible. I had this dream that I was in a house, and I was trying to get to sleep, or I was asleep, and I woke up and there's this big being standing over me, and it was just there, this big black shadow, terrifying, and I'm thinking, oh no, I don't want that, and didn't like it, went lucid and woke up. He had sent me, he was a bear standing over my bed, my real bed. He'd imagined he was standing, bit pervy, yes, standing over my bed like this, and that's how I perceived it. So obviously you've got your own filters and how you're going to perceive something, so it might not be exactly, but the fact that, I mean, we had so many more hits than ever than non-hits, it was just absolutely ridiculous.
Sometimes it wasn't even something we focused on. There was one night where quite accidentally I had a dream where a long pointed stone had felled my caveman wife or something, and she fatally injured, and in the same hour she dreamt of a long pointed stone had felled her son.
And we hadn't been sending those dreams, but we'd already made that connection. And I definitely believe that you send out these I call them golden links to people, and you once you connect, your mind or your spirit is connected, and you've got like a quick highway to that person, and that's how you can know when there's something wrong with them, they're sick, know whatever, they could be anywhere in the world, or when they're going to phone, etc. You've got that link. It's like somebody's tugging on that umbilical cord. So that's a shared holotropic consciousness. We're sharing that consciousness. We're in some realm and we're influencing each other.
It's sleep and
don't have to know them, and that's through sleep, through REM sleep. Nearly there. So again, just to remind you, the theta waves we think are probably the most likely one, between 4 and 7.5 hertz. Conclusion. So what can I conclude from all this? Not much. Some strange experience can be explained using current scientific knowledge. So as I said, there are some things that are attributable to the mechanics of sleep. So when you wake up and you're frozen in the bed, it's because your body hasn't yet processed those chemicals to allow you to move. Things like that are explainable. However, REM sleep, I reckon, is definitely a gateway to the holotropic consciousness. The holotropic consciousness is the whole consciousness. So there's the hylotropic consciousness, the consensus reality that we're programmed to believe, that everything's material. And then there's the holotropic consciousness, it's experiencing everything. We're experiencing everything. Psychoid experiences. So psychoid experience is an experience that somebody can have had hundreds of thousands of years ago as different beings or whatever, and it's part of the collective consciousness, and we're like a fear of darkness or whatever, a fear of spiders, something like that, and it's shared in all myths and cultures. So obviously you don't want to be chased by a demon or something. You'd much rather have an angel type being there. And I think that parasomnia, so these sleep disturbances, are a psychological predisposition to allow you to have these archetypes, these inborn archetypes, so these ideas of, the fairies or whatever, that are part of the whole being human being, or whatever, an animal, part of the collective unconsciousness. Carl Jung said supernatural beings are using our consciousness as doorways into reality. So doorway into reality. So I say that it's not paranormal, it's supernormal, and this whole consciousness, this holo consciousness, is the key to understanding all paranormal experiences, what we call, then remember they've given it a label because it's not normal. Why should it be not normal? It's everybody's having these types of experiences. So Rupert Sheldrake says the science delusion is the belief that science already understands the nature of reality, leaving only the details to be filled in, which we all know is rubbish. Terence McKenna says, for all we know nothing. And I just want to leave you with this one. William James, another philosopher, the world of our present consciousness is only one out of many worlds of consciousness that exist. So if you practice magic or anything, you know that there's 4 different realms and we're just stuck in the bottom one. We can go a few, and that those other worlds must contain experiences which have a meaning for our life, and also that although the main experiences of this world are discrete, the two become continuous, so it all becomes one and part of your life, and that's usually the awakening that people have. And then once they've had it maybe through REM sleep, they'll experience everything all the time. It's like a little switch in you, and you just see everything and experience everything differently and think about it differently. It's totally changed your paradigm, and higher energies that filter in. By your bed, embrace it. It's probably a bit of DMT. It's probably you've been from REM sleep and you're accessing those other realms. I reckon that a lot of it is real, and don't be scared by it, because fear is a bad hindrance to it. Just embrace it and bring it on, because I think it'll help you a lot. Yes?
I was wondering, is it possible, I had an embarrassing situation happen where I dreamt about work and my boss gave me all these tasks to do, and I went to work the next day and thought it was real.
Yeah.
And so I got myself indoors.
Yeah.
Like he said, what jungle juice are you taking?
Yes, it's very common, and you know the idea that people have these dreams that they go to school naked and all that sort of stuff. That's more sort of a non-REM dream. I think it's less DMT produced about that. It's part of consolidation of memory and making sure that you function as a human being and that you learn. It's a learning process. So whether it's a task that you have to learn about, or a way of protecting yourself, or a skill.
Not knowing that it was a dream, like thinking it was real.
Well, yes, that's common. Why wouldn't you think that? I mean, some people have dreams and they think there was a real experience. Yeah. I mean, nobody's saying that abductions are necessarily real. I mean, they probably are, but you can have that experience, and some people will pass it off as not being real, just a dream, and other people will say, it was real. I know it was real, and they might not have any evidence that it was real, but they can know. So that idea, but if you remember, you're living inside your brain, okay? Every experience you have is real. You're producing the hormones as you have the nightmares and the dreams. You're producing everything that reacts to that. It is a real experience. Whether it's one that's external and other people have shared it or not, you're having that experience. You're having it. So if you want to put it into a box and say, well, it was only a dream, but nobody knows what a dream is. I think it's just accessing via a different consciousness, and you really are having those types of experiences. You're maybe not be physically having them, but you're definitely experiencing. So it's still real.
It's terrific when you share one. I read an anecdote when Gemma was talking about her and the daughter sharing the goblin. I read a story recently where a man is next to his sleeping wife. He's staying up reading his book, and then suddenly he turns out the light. He says, okay, I'm done. Closes the book, turns off the light. So he's gone from high stimulation to very low stimulation, and at that point he sees what appears to be a ghost, walks through the wall and walks over and starts looking down at his wife. And he recognized the ghost as being the actor Tyrone Power. And he said, well, this is unusual, you know. But the Tyrone Power then turns around and walks back through the wall and disappears. So he proceeds to wake up the wife, and she had just been dreaming of Tyrone Power. So either he has his stimulation, he's gone from stimulation to no stimulation, he's changed his consciousness, she's in that gateway consciousness, and either she sent it to him or he's gone into
or he's
her.
just had that shared, he's been in the same place and shared that experience. Yeah. And that's what's fascinating. And you don't have to be physically next to each other to have that shared experience. Commonly people have similar dreams. I've had dreams in haunted houses. I had a dream when I was a child, very, very briefly. We were all sleeping in the same bed. My dad was moved into this house, and it was a terrifying house, and there was three children and my dad. We were all sleeping in the same bed because we were all scared. We all had the same dream, that this woman had come through the ceiling over us and hovered over us. Now remember, we'd all had this experience, including my dad, and she'd looked like all floaty, and she'd had like a nightie on and stuff, and she just hovered over us. In the morning we all said, now one of my brothers was only like 2 or 3, and he had that experience too. So we'd all been in the same realm. We weren't all awake, like we hadn't opened our eyes and all been lying there and going, oh, look at her, but we'd all experienced the same thing. So we'd all been in that same level of consciousness and had that experience. And I think that's the gateway that we need to talk about. Finished, yes?
Yes. Great. Thanks.
Thank you.